Hey guys, it's March 11th, 2018, and this is your episode 137 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me, as usual, are Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Laurel Black.
Hi. Ben
Charles, how's it going?
Hi everybody, doing well.
Ben, that was a pretty gnarly marimba injury you showed on Facebook.
Yeah, I busted a knuckle. It was right before a lesson, too. I had to start my lesson late because of Casey.
So was that from the glissandos or something? I was going to say, I've never had a marimba do that to me.
I don't even know. I was just playing, and then I looked down and I was bleeding.
I've done it. You hit the marimbas that don't have smooth edges, you hit the edge of the accidental with your hand, and just gnarly.
I've done that on vibraphone a lot.
Ugh.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I've done it on multi-percussion, and I remember specifically practicing Rebonds A and trying to get around some of those licks and how quick they are and how quick you have to move, and you're going super fast and super low against rims that are very close to each other, and I would nick my knuckles on them all the time.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was a way successful introduction. So now so you guys, our guest today is a performer, a composer, and educator. He's originally from Australia, but currently based in London. His musical world crosses all genres from classical to pop, contemporary music to cabaret, musical theater, electroacoustic solo projects, dance, and everything in between. In Australia, he regularly performed with the Sydney Symphony, Australian Opera and Ballet Orchestra, and Synergy Percussion. He's featured as marimba soloist on the soundtrack to the major motion picture, The Black Balloon. He's presented all over the world and is also a dear friend of ours. So hello and welcome to Jeremy Barnett.
Hello.
How's it going, buddy?
Say top of the afternoon to you all. Anyway.
I told everyone in our group chat and planning this, I was excited to sit here and hear Jeremy say marimba for an hour.
I told him that. I was gonna.
All you want.
I actually told him that. I was gonna say, Jeremy, you need to concentrate really hard to say marimba to disappoint Ben.
Well, I do say marimba because that's what it is.
It's true. It's not a marimba.
There's no R at the end.
Well, good. Well, Jeremy, are you still playing at the Globe Theatre? This is like the Globe Theatre, the very famous Globe Theatre, right?
Yeah. That was a season run. So unfortunately, that came to an end. Sort of a what did we do? We started in July and went through to October. Was kind of the run of the play. We're doing King Lear. Was the 2017 production of King Lear that was really, really great. But I don't know, we would rotate with another show. So it was either, sometimes there'd be 6 shows in a week, sometimes there'd be 4, and depending on the schedule, because they have a number of productions that rotate throughout at any one time. So, but it was just a season run, unfortunately. So I'm waiting for the phone call to go back currently.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How are you used how did they use you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a pretty standard thing at the Globe that they incorporate musicians. And I mean, they have live musicians there during the production. And so we would play, for this show we did all the sort of the scene change music, I guess. And then there was like a choreographed piece at the beginning and the end with the actors that they were either sort of doing some. They called it, what they called the opening of the show, they called it a dumb show, which is where essentially you have like a 3-minute kind of silently acted overview of the entire play, of the entire plot. A quick sort of like a small, it's kind of like a dance, I guess. And so that was done to music that we played. And then at the very end, there was sort of a final little sort of outro section that turned into a dance that they did, that we accompanied. But also, I don't know if you're all familiar with King Lear, but the plot centers around a big storm that's in the middle of the play that is kind of meant to represent his descent into total madness as he realizes that he's betrayed the wrong daughter. He's betrayed the daughter that he loved, and anyway, his 2 daughters, other daughters that he thought he liked, are actually out to get him and get all his to inherit all his land and all his money. There's a big storm in the middle, and because the Globe tries to keep things very minimal with technology, they try and be a bit traditional with, they're trying to not sort of have everything overrun with special effects and technology and stuff. The way they did the Storm, instead of having, sound design and, crashing thunder and everything, they had the cast all had drums. And so they were around kind of doing sort of, rumbly sound effects and stuff. And so for quite an extended period, the composer had written, it was really complicated actually, because we had to they're still doing the dialogue in amongst little, sort of drum fills and drum beats and things where they're crisscrossing the stage and being the Storm. And essentially my job was actually up there to play the proper parts and help them actually all stay in time while they're doing this quite, complicated thing, and then trying to shout out their lines and have a fight scene and all these kind of crazy things. So it was quite interactive in that respect. But then, or, other times you're just playing a 3-second little sound effect cue, and, everything in between. So it was more incidental music than, I think normally they have more sort of song and dance numbers and turn it into a bit more of a sort of a show. They play with a song or something, they put the bands there for that. But for this, we were much more sort of the actual proper incidental music and sound effects.
Does the Globe Theatre do enough music with their shows that they house and store percussion instruments, or did you have to?
They have a full-time music department.
Wow.
Yeah, and so down in the bowels of the place, they actually had, they have rooms of stuff, and mostly it's period instruments. So there's lots of, in percussion land, there's lots of beautiful wooden rope tension drums of all different shapes and sizes. And obviously, lots of string instruments and cornets and old brass instruments and things. So they've got this big collection of period stuff or sort of replica instruments. But then also a full kit of, marimba and a vibraphone, chimes and electronics. And so I think they probably came in late. There was a director of the Globe who has just ended her term there, and she was quite controversial because she was all for modernizing and amplifying music and using more modern themes and miking the actors. And for those of you that don't know the Globe, they're quite controversial things for the Globe, to put microphones on the actors and to amplify the instruments and to use a bit more lighting effects and stuff. It's all a bit that sort of, again, goes against, the Globe purists who are really there to see how it was done back in Shakespeare's time. And so she went more in that direction and would have, they'd use electronic instruments and pre-programmed, drum machines and stuff for dance numbers and things. And she's ended. And so there's a bit of it's going to be interesting to see what happens next, because the new artistic director has brought back in no amplification, no lighting effects. I think they're going to what they call shared light, which is where they just use natural light, because the Globe's outdoor. Some of the audience in the stage is undercover, but the famous yard at the Globe is actually open to the elements, and they do a show regardless of what the weather's like. So, yes, but so they use the natural light and maybe just candles and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens down the road musically. But yeah, that was a long answer to the question of, yes, it's music. There's musicians involved in every production.
Cool.
Yeah, there's gear there, and yeah, it's nice.
What do you got there, Laura?
The main instrument I was using was these two massive taiko drums to kind of, because I had to sort of be bigger and louder than the drummers on stage for this Storm. So, they happened to own these taikos. So, since they're proper taiko, they were sort of, like giant Chinese tom-toms. They were calling them taikos, but they were essentially, think of a massive, how big, sorry, I'm looking at my wall to work out in inches. I don't know, 30-inch, like a concert bass drum size, but the Chinese tom-toms with the skins pinned onto the sides, and
What do you got there, Laurel?
Oh, I was just interested to know how long the play was, because Lear is a long play. It can be 4 hours or something.
They cut it down. They had it down to, I should know this because I did it 50 times. When did you do it? I can't remember. I think it was 3 hours, including interval. There were a few decent cuts in it. They try and keep everything under 4, I think, because then they don't have to pay overtime. I think the contract said, the union or whatever, says that, it had to be under 4, but we were down, maybe it was 3 and a bit. I don't remember, I'll be honest. I can't remember, but yeah, it wasn't extraordinary. But where the way the Globe is, there's a balcony above the stage. Everyone should look up pictures of this place if you don't understand what we're talking about, because it's quite an extraordinary looking venue, and there's a musician's balcony that sits above the stage at the back, and that's where we were. And the way I was positioned on stage meant I couldn't actually get out because there was a door. So we would kind of sneak out because often we'd be 20 minutes without making any sound. But it was just because you're visible the whole time, I couldn't get out. So I actually ended up working out how to kind of slide off my chair onto the floor and end up lying under tychos and things for 20 minutes and trying to memorize some of these speeches and stuff just to kind of actually stay on the ball a bit. But yeah, no, I was on stage the entire time for the 50 odd years that we did. So I got to know some of it quite well.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned that controversy of adding more technology, miking the performers, using unnatural light, etc. How do you feel? Would that add more, or what would you say? I'd like to ask Laurel too, because she's a fan of Shakespeare.
Yeah, I personally, I don't have an opinion, and I think it's like, I'll be honest. The only time I really noticed it was I went and watched the other show that was on. They were doing Much Ado About Nothing, and they'd set it in. It was like set in Mexico and like the border with America, like at the turn of last century, like 100 years ago. It sounds a bit weird, but they could make the characters and the story work. And so the band was kind of mariachi-esque for that. And they had, and there was a bit sort of, I can't think of the words, but yeah, and it was a bit more groove-based. So they had a guitarist and a percussionist and a mariachi trumpeter. And for that, all the actors were mic'd. And where I sat was sort of near a speaker, and it was really loud and a bit, because the Globe, you sit up there are like 3 tiers of seats. And so it was like we'd be sitting and looking down to where the actor was, but the voice is coming from up there. And I think I noticed that was, it was a bit odd and it was a bit loud. But for our show, the actors weren't mic'd. We were mic'd. But the whole time during tech, the whole issue was making sure that we didn't drown out the actors. And there was some sound design, so they had speakers, and certain effects were triggered from the sound desk. But I don't really have an honest opinion. I think that kind of could cross over into not just the Globe, but general discussions about being faithful to the past versus I don't know.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there. Yeah,
being sort of, are you being a museum or are you, furthering, trying to go forward? I don't know, but yeah. So I don't know in terms of the Globe. Maybe it could be a balance. I'm not sure why does it have to be one or the other, but I think it's such an institution. People are really, really passionate about it. And I would probably step back from that discussion, knowing enough about it to really, wave a flag one way or the other.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else?
I think it's cool to, try to preserve the cool thing about the fact that it is the Globe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can take the plays and set them in any type of contemporary setting that will help tell the story. Like you just said about Much Ado, they set it like at the turn of the century or something. You can always do that, but I think it's kind of cool having never been to it, and not seen something. I just think it's neat. I don't think I have an academic stance to defend about it other than I just think it's cool.
Yeah. Oh, we lost Megan.
For me, I again, feeling kind of like Jeremy, not being an expert in the field, I don't want to make too much commentary, but it reminds me in a parallel of something that Brian Calhoun talked about one time. And Brian talked about doing arrangements of things, and he said that he wanted to only do arrangements of things that he felt could be improved by doing them on marimba and vibraphone. So he didn't want to just simply, I like that piece, so I'm going to do it. And I think a lot of the time when I hear piano transcriptions on marimba, it's kind of like, why are you doing a piano piece on marimba? It's not adding anything. Like, what, it's making it worse, if anything. And so I think with the technology and plays, it's like, you know, if it can actually add something, if it can make it better, quote unquote, which is obviously subjective, then I think it's a good thing. But I think then oftentimes it's just like, oh, well, it's just easier for us to project, so we're just going to use mics or something like this. So I don't know, kind of a non-opinion, but explanation.
Right, it might just be practical.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that came to mind is, okay, orchestra concert or symphonic band concert or something. Okay, we're going to play this piece, but we're going to really, you know, razzmatazz it up by adding some flashing lights. Just like, no, please don't do that.
But
makes it
at the
so
same rate, have you
lame.
ever been to an orchestra concert with a soloist and you're like struggling to hear the piano or the violin?
Sure.
It's like, why don't you just mic that a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a good point. Laura, how about another question for Jeremy?
Yeah, so let's stick with, you know, things that you're doing now. I know one of the big things you do is accompany dance classes. So I'm really interested to know how you do that. And do you just improvise? And do you do all styles of dance? Or do you feel that you're better at accompanying certain styles than others? Just if you would talk about that.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I could backtrack and...
or you could start with how you got into it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because that kind of, it sort of was all a bit by accident. That it actually started when I was in Boston. There was an ad it was the Boston Ballet, and they were looking for musicians they ran classes for children with Down syndrome and autism. And they wanted live musicians. They specifically wanted someone to play hand percussion, like djembe. And it was through, it was NEC, and while I was there, that the thing came around, and so I applied and started doing that. And so that was more just kind of, I mean, with a class of children with sort of special needs, it was more just sort of a chance for them to sort of socialize and be physically active. So it was essentially playing, you know, just beats and things. When I got to London, this might nudge on another question I think you might ask, but when I got to London and was trying to find work of any kind, I sort of made the big long list of things, every kind of job I'd ever done as a musician. And I thought, well, I've done dance. And so I wrote that down. And then I, you know, started trying to find people that played for dance classes. And, you know, one thing led to another, and someone very kindly sent me the name of someone who actually constantly books musicians here. And that sort of then sprung into like actually sort of, you know, about half my professional work is now playing for dance. And so what was what do I do? So I have, the school I'm at is a contemporary dance school. And they primarily teach Cunningham, as in Merce Cunningham. They teach that style of dance, or they use that sort of pedagogy. And they also, but at a dance school, they also have to do ballet. So there's always contemporary or ballet class, and I ended up playing for both just because I was just saying yes, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. I'll go and do it because it was some work. And at the time, you know, when you're really looking for work, so I played for whatever, you know, little kids, adult classes, complete beginners, professional classes, whatever. You know, I'll just go and do it. And so I turn up generally. I do contemporary classes because that's when they're booking anyone but a pianist. Ballet technically is traditionally accompanied by a pianist, but I do those as well. And mostly, I mean, every musician does it differently. But yeah, I just sort of just improvise really. In contemporary dance, the Cunningham is very regimental, and so it's actually, there's no great secret to what to do if you're a drummer, that they want really obvious counts. And so just they'll count the, you know, teachers count it off and generally give you the sort of the vibe of what they want to hear. And so you just kind of go from there, you know, take their lead, and they give, you know, the classic 5, 6, 7, 8 in whatever speed they want. And I just, because I have a little set of hand drums, and I use one of those wave drums called Wave Drum, one of them, and I run that through a little loop pedal, and yeah, just improvise and make a few layers of loops. And either I might play a bit of piano over the top of that if it's long enough, or, you know, just kind of rock out on a djembe for a little bit. kind of just trying to make it fit with whatever they're needing. If it's a very short sequence, then I might just play djembe. If it's really long, I'll make some loops, and or sometimes they need something really ambient, so maybe something without any counts, and I do my best sort of Arvo Pärt impersonation on piano and whatever they want, really. But yeah, for me, I mean, because it all comes from just playing grooves. It's improvising sort of. It's kind of the way to go for me. The school has other instruments that there's a guitarist, and a bass player, and a multi-instrumentalist, and I think each of them might have a sort of stock standard set of tunes that they know fit with certain types of sequences. But again, they'll still make a couple of loops and then just solo over the top of that. So was that an answer to a question? I've forgotten what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, getting to London and starting to kind of break in and find work, and you made that big list and start getting around. I think another question we had for you was, you've broken into the scene in, Sydney, London, Boston, somewhat. Or at least you've really scratched the surface and started making money in several different cities. Can you just talk about maybe advice to kind of breaking in?
Sure. Well, I'd have to quantify. I'm not sure I'd really say I've totally broken in London, but I'm making a comfortable living.
But you
now.
played at the wait a minute. You played at the Globe Theatre. So let me clarify for you.
I know. Yeah.
And you're leaking a comfortable wage.
Will they call again?
I think you're good.
Okay. So so the different cities in Sydney, because I was born and raised in Sydney and did my first degree there in Sydney. I did two, actually. I did like a standard undergraduate, and then I did a 1-year little performance certificate degree. Sydney's not the biggest scene, and so I did what, I guess is probably you would do if you really wanted to make a go at it, is that I just, I learned from the right people. I learned from the people in the symphony, and I was really lucky that my high school, the teacher there that I started with, so when I was 12, he was the long-time percussionist in the Sydney Symphony. He'd been in this orchestra then already for about 30 years. So he was my teacher for 2 years, and then I learned from a freelancer who played at the Opera House a lot. And then I went to the conservatorium where my teacher was the timpanist in the symphony. And so just by growing up inside it and having the right people and being in the youth orchestra where another percussionist from the symphony comes and tutors you, and then going and doing my degree in Sydney and learning again from the right people, it just sort of, there's not that many students coming out that, by the time I did my little performance certificate, I think we'd call it a graduate diploma, my teacher was the principal percussionist in the symphony, and he was like, right, we need someone this week. It's the scene's that short that you can be the grad student, and they're calling you because they need a 9th percussionist for, what was the first thing I ever did? It was, is there a Cuban overture? Gershwin, or who wrote something? Yeah, they needed someone to play bass, so that was my first gig, was because I was his student. And so I don't think that happens in Boston or in London. Well, actually, London's a different story, but, that's quite rare as I've gone and seen the world, that, you happen to be, there's just not that many people. And so, so then you get one call, and then you get the next call, and then you do a bit of study, and then you get another call, and then someone's sick. And, so Sydney kind of was really just, by climbing the ladder, and also not, and it's just not that big a place musicians wise. There's a school there, there's the conservatorium there, and there would be maybe 4 percussionists in each year. And so, at least there were when I was there. So there were 16 of us total across all years in the percussion department, and counting sort of, music ed majors and someone who might want to play jazz, and a few guys that were just drum set players, but they thought they should learn to play tune percussion and timpani. So Sydney, and and then, and through that also, then people also, I've got this teaching job. There's quite a lot of teaching as well, because most schools will have a music department or offer a band program and stuff. So, those sort of 2 areas, and then, all the bits in between of random freelance bits and pieces, and, my friend has a band, and he wants a vibraphone player. And, I think Sydney's just through its size and, doing my job and practicing and learning my craft, then it sort of evolved quite naturally. In Boston, I was a student, and so I would never really say I cracked it, because if anyone from I forgot the Department of Homeland Security is listening, I didn't do any work in America because I'm not allowed to. So I didn't actually. Yeah, I could work inside the school, and the Boston Ballet was permitted under there's little ways that you're allowed to do work related to your study.
Why was the Boston Ballet permitted?
Because it was through. I mean, I could have asked to get permission to do work that was directly related to my course of study, and so I'm there studying music. And
I see,
so,
of course, yeah.
and I forget the status I could get. It had all these. It was a process, but I had to get approval from the school that they had to say, yes, we support you doing this.
Yeah, I remember that came up at UNT with a lot of jazz musicians, because as a jazz musician, you need to be out gigging. It's part of how you learn, and so if you can't take gigs, then you're kind of stuck. So yeah, there's some form UNT had that they had to fill out for that.
Yeah, the way there's like a line in the law that the music schools interpret that it's to allow people to like do internships. Like if you're a medical student and you've come from another country and you come into America, it's a natural part that at some point you have to go and do some work in a hospital as an intern. And so the music schools sort of read that line as well and say, well, it's kind of like you have, part of being a musician is being in the real world and doing that stuff. So to a certain point, there's a limit on how much work I could do, I think, in that respect. Yeah. So it was just sort of, I mean, and Boston is, a pretty unique place for meeting people and all that. So that was sort of, I mean, but I was there really meant there as, as a student. And then London was probably, it was really frightening at first. We moved here because my grandfather is British, or was. He passed away a while ago, but he was born here. And so there's a visa you can get, an ancestry visa that gets you in for 5 years without any work restriction. Because normally if you want to come to a country, you have to get someone in that country who's going to offer you a job. Would sponsor that visa. So you come to the country to do that job. But an ancestry visa, you can just come on in with no work. And so we turned up. My wife, Nina, who I should say you probably might know from Casey's cymbal piece. He wrote a piece, the Crash Cymbal Etude, with the pre-recorded tape. My wife is the French voice on that piece.
The French voice. Yeah, so... and Jeremy recorded, so it's like, those two together. Jeremy has all this recording know-how, and Nina's a great voice actress, so it's like, okay, perfect, bam.
Yeah,
amazing.
So she had studied here. She did a master's here in London, and so when we kind of got to when my student visa was ending, it was where do we go? Do we go to stay in America? Because we were engaged, and so we kind of had access to it was a pretty crazy situation. We had access to, like, we could stay in America, we could go to Australia, or this visa turned up, and we could, come to England. And so she sort of saw that her work really centered in London, and it's an amazing freelance city for musicians. So we sort of thought, well, let's do it. And so we got here, and I had one contact. I had one friend who was an Australian who I had done like Australian youth orchestra project actually I shouldn't say it's that long ago because we're all so young. We had done something together. And so anyway, I was just frantically Googling anything and everyone something to do with percussion in London, and trying to find anyone who might, and it turned out I found someone I actually knew. So we got in touch, and she was a huge help with offering a bit of practice space, and she actually got me a gig. She actually had something she couldn't do, so I went and played it. It was just like it was a production of West Side Story in a school way out in West England, and so other than her and one gig, I actually had no contacts. And fortunately, we had a family friend we could live with for a couple of weeks, and then my cousin we could live with for about 6 weeks. But that was kind of all we had. We had like this 6 or 7 weeks before we had to kind of find somewhere to live. And amazingly, Nina found some work as a front of house. She'd worked at a theater in Boston as selling the programs and tickets and running the bar and stuff. And so she got that job, and then she got me a job at the same theatre doing that. So completely unpercussion related. And it essentially made me realize that for about the first 18 months we were here, I kind of had to put greater artistic ambitions completely on hold because we had to eat. And it was incredibly sort of humbling time to go and do like minimum wage job when you think I was also like finishing my doctorate. So I was like, wait, fuck, I shouldn't say that. I'm a doctor, but I'm working behind a bar in a theater. And it was like, God, this is not what I thought my life was going to be like, you know, and then, but it just applying for stacks of jobs and getting stacks of rejections and then a couple of little snippets of something. And you know, the dance stuff worked out quite quickly that this guy, you know, I went and played and he said, oh, could you do this regular class every week? And then that grew into something quite quickly of 2 classes, then 4 classes, and then 6 classes. And then a little bit of teaching that evolved into more teaching. And those, you know, a few little things sort of sprouted. But along the way, there was an awful lot of, you know, rejection letters and didn't get an interview for a job that I'm way more qualified for than they need and all that kind of stuff. So advice, it's really hard because you really want to be focused on what your dream is and, you know, go for it and don't take your eye off, well, I really, you know, this is my thing and this is what I really have to do artistically. So don't forget that. But in the meantime, I think don't say no to any opportunity that would come up. I think whether it's teaching a whole class of 5-year-olds how to play the djembe, which I did, or doing some recording or subbing, you know, going out to the middle of nowhere and playing in a, you know, little orchestra or doing something non-musical. Just, you know, I think just keep at it because, you know, the world's bigger than just maybe your one vision and you never know what's going to come of it, I think. So I could do a shameless plug. I wrote an article that they put in Percussive Notes, actually all about this, because it's really difficult. And especially because the hardest part I found is I had everyone watching me. You know, my whole family was like, oh, you're going to go to England, you're going to be really famous and you can do all this stuff and you got your doctorate and you're really talented and everyone's watching you. And then I got to get a job interview because I did my doctorate and I've been looking for like university work. I got an interview at a university in Plymouth, or I got an interview. Actually, I did an interview at the conservatoire in Birmingham for a job, and I would tell everyone, "Oh, I've got this. You know, it's going to be great. I'm going to get the job I really want." And then you don't get it, and then you get another interview, and then you don't get it, and it's horrendous because you keep having to ring home halfway across the world saying, "No, didn't get it. Can I borrow some money?" You know, right. And it's really difficult, but just you have to go and meet people. This is funny. I mean, London is quite amazing in that you get gigs by meeting people in pubs. And I thought it was a joke when everyone joked about how you have to go to the pub and meet people. But you do, literally. I would go to the pub through a friend of a friend and meet some percussionists and then, oh, what do you need next Tuesday? I need someone to cover my teaching. And just you have to go and meet people and, you know, be nice and just keep at it.
Yep,
you know,
sure.
I have, but on but on the flip side is I haven't, you know, just yesterday I bought a vibraphone, and that's the first tuned percussion instrument I'll have had access to since, except for random practice, since I left Boston. You know, so
Right.
I mean, sacrifices. I don't have marimba, but I have my master's in marimba, and so I haven't played. I've had one marimba gig, and that was through a friend of a friend of a friend who was wanting to do something Australian. So I said, "Oh, I can play an Australian piece on marimba for you." And yeah, so it was rough for about 18 months, and now we've turned a profit. So you know,
Yeah, great.
yeah, it's tricky because you kind of I realized that I've had lots of ambitions along the way. Like for a little while, I wanted to be in an orchestra, and then I wanted to teach at university. Both are things I still love to do, but I've sort of come to realize that in the meantime, while you're waiting for those things to come to fruition, you got to be doing some other things because they might never have happened. But you could either have sat around waiting for that to come true, or just been busy in the meantime with the rest of your life. So you know, that's what I feel like I've done. Is I'm really comfortable and happy with everything else I'm doing, while I'm waiting for that random job to come along that maybe I'll get an interview for, that maybe someone might think I'm qualified for. So I don't think I'm no longer seeing it as I haven't made it because I haven't got that job at a university, or I haven't made it because I didn't make a solo career, or I don't know. I think, I'm teaching a lot of beginners at the moment and I'm loving it and I'm really good at it. And so,
Yeah, great.
So,
a lot of what Jeremy was saying reminds me of just about a week or two ago, we had Craig Morris on campus here. Craig is the former principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony. And our trumpet professor asked him to just sort of tell his sort of quick bio of, how'd you get where you got? And Craig said when he finished school, he was, around 22, 24, something like that, and was taking lessons with someone. And he asked his teacher, who was playing some symphony, I couldn't tell you which one, do you think I have a future in this? Do you think like I could play the trumpet professionally? And his teacher was like, I'm not really sure. Why don't you come back next week and ask the same question? And it's like, you think of someone that's going to be principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony 10 years later as, at that young of an age, he had to just be a monster and everyone knew he was going to make it. But it sounds like that wasn't the case. He was a good player, but it wasn't in any way clear that he was going to, as we say, quote unquote, make it. And Craig said the only way that he did make it was just by being persistent and just literally just clawing his way to the top. And Jeremy talking about, getting rejections, Craig said that he was kept on coming up like second place, like runner-up on auditions, and being from a family of non-musicians, you have to make that phone call like, no, I didn't get the job in St. Louis, sorry, I'm going to be coming back home now. It's like they don't understand necessarily that it's not like, oh, you go to college, you get a degree, and then you probably have a job waiting for you. And Craig actually had a really good story about when he auditioned at Chicago, he actually missed the finals by 1 vote, but there was only one guy that got enough votes to advance to finals, and Craig was like the next runner-up or whatever. And so he just sort of got shooed into the finals, not having actually qualified for it. And he said in those 5 minutes of his life, he got more determined than he had ever been. And in the finals, the votes were flipped. He had 9 votes and the runner-up had 5. And then after that, he said he won the next, I think it was 4 professional auditions he took after that. But yeah, I mean,
Dang.
But again, like, it's crazy to me. Like, you would think that at 25 years of age, it's like, yeah, we're just waiting for a gig to open up for this guy. But that was not at all the case.
Yeah.
Sorry, Laurel, you had something.
Oh, well, I have, it's kind of morphed a little now. One is a comment that Jeremy kept saying, like, in the meantime, you do this, and in the meantime, you do that. In the meantime is the title of one of my favorite books. And it's about exactly that. Like, when you're aiming for your dream, you have to do things. You can't just be paralyzed while you wait. Yeah, and the other thing I was going to ask you, if you felt that you were, meeting your artistic needs now, and then you kept talking, and it seems like, yeah, you are. Do you think so?
I've got things I'd love to do. I improvise, and but it's on me. I have to, get out and go and meet some people. And it's been tricky coming out of a quite a long period where I just didn't have time to think about doing that stuff. I'm almost sort of, a victim of my own, determination to try and we've got to earn some money and do this. And now really busy. And so now I have to think about, okay, great. There's a break coming up. There's no school. Maybe I could set up my electronic stuff and plug in the Mallet Cat and get back to just having a play for myself. And so it's actually, so I guess the answer is no, but I've definitely, because I have an itch to do it. And even if I just set up my gear for a day or two in my little half office room we have space to rent here, I'd love to do more. And slowly, meeting people. The dance school actually is really great because there's so many musicians that come in and out of it. There's lots of interaction and meeting of different players and stuff. But I think I was going to talk about the in the meantime stuff is that I think what has sort of dawned on me too is that instead of seeing the meantime stuff as, oh God, I have to go and do this while I'm waiting, go and enjoy it and invest in it. And it makes it much more satisfying. Instead of this dreaded day of teaching that I have to do to earn some money, I think teaching's a blast because little kids are hilarious. And if you try and be good at it and be passionate about it, then A, you have a better day, and B, lo and behold, word gets back that you're a really good teacher and you get more work. So it's, I find, it's invest in all of it, sort of, I don't know, put your heart into all of it, I guess would be the.
Yeah. It reminds me of a conversation I had with an old friend of Laurel's and I back in West Virginia. And this fellow was directing one of the local choirs, and he was expressing like, oh, this frustration. I don't have enough people or enough of the caliber of singers I want to take them on tour, and I have this vision of what being this director is like. I want to take them on tour. I want to go from school to school to school, go venue, and we can, he has this like clear idea of what it's supposed to be. And I remember just trying to say like, yeah, but in the meantime, think of all the stuff you could be doing. Like I can imagine flash forward 5 years and you're so busy booking tours, booking hotels, booking buses, and you're like, oh, I'm totally drowning in all this work. I wish I had time to write that paper, or I wish I had time to make that recording. Or it's like, oh, dude, take advantage of it now while you can. Like in the meantime, is so valuable,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just having this conversation with actually Michael Burrett, my mentor, former teacher and former guest on our podcast. I'm in a percussion. We were at the UCA Percussion Festival yesterday, and he was one of the guest artists. And I asked him, I was like, how do you make time for your own personal projects? And like, at what point do you really have to like say no to things to make space and time for your personal projects? And like, at what point, I don't know, I was just kind of asking for advice on this, because sometimes I feel like if you say yes to everything, then you're doing everyone else's projects, right? And like, what about your projects and that paper and whatever? And he said he had some good advice, which was just like, you always have to find a balance, and you're always the person that has to keep that balance in check. Like, it's never easy, and you're in control of it because you're your own person, and you just have to always search for that balance, find that balance, and you're the only person that can find that balance. And then keep it there, because it's never just going to sit there. You have to be in control of it. I thought that was good advice, because it's like, oh, it made me feel like, oh yeah, this is my fault. I'm in charge of this, and I'm the only person that can control that. And it was also kind of more of a positive thing of like, balance is such a positive word and a good thing, and it is a hard thing for us to achieve, but in a way, it can be filled with good things. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
But
well, Megan, while your mic's warmed up there, why don't you give us your news topic today, your current event?
Absolutely. Sure. So today I wanted to talk about the organization Bang on a Can. You guys have all heard of Bang on a Can, right?
Yeah.
So they were featured on a New Music USA project grant recently, and it made me kind of go back and look at their organization again, and I forgot how many projects are under the Bang on a Can umbrella. It is insane. So to give you a little more background information for those of you listening who maybe are less familiar with this organization, the members of Bang on a Can are David Lang, Michael Gordon, and Julia Wolf, composers, right? So they're kind of the head honchos of this. They're playing their music. They're writing specifically for the group. But then the members are a collective, and that group is called the Bang on a Can All-Stars. The mission of this organization is they're dedicated to making music new, which I thought was kind of creative, because we're always saying making new music, and they're dedicated to making music new. The New York Times says Bang on a Can plays a central role in fostering a new kind of audience that doesn't concern itself with boundaries. If music is made with originality and integrity, these listeners will come. Their first official event was on Mother's Day in 1987 in the Soho Art Gallery, and that was the first Bang on a Can marathon. So 1987, that's pretty cool. This organization has been going on for quite a while now. And they're a multifaceted performing arts organization with a broad range of year-round international activities now. They've grown in the past 30 years to include all these different things. Here's a quote from the members. I don't know which one specifically. It just says kind of all three of them. But they say, when we started Bang on a Can, we never imagined that our 12-hour marathon festival of mostly unknown music would morph into a giant international organization dedicated to the support of experimental music wherever we could find it. But it has, and we are so gratified to still be hard at work all of these years later. The reason is really clear to us. We started this organization because we believed that making new music is a utopian act, that people needed to hear this music, and they needed to hear it presented in the most persuasive way, with the best players, with the best programs, for the best listeners, in the best context. Our commitment to changing the environment for this music has kept us busy and growing, and we are not done yet. So those projects that are under the Bang on a Can umbrella are the Bang on a Can Marathon that happens every year. This year, I think it's early May. I was in New York and I attended like a day of the festival and I saw Philip Glass perform. It was amazing. And so many people there. Really, really, really cool projects happening there at that marathon. Second, the People's Commissioning Fund. And this is a membership program to commission emerging composers. So just lots of commissions that are happening. The Bang on a Can All-Stars, this is the group, the collective of musicians. They tour to major festivals and concert venues around the world every single year, and they do quite a few recording projects as well. The Bang on a Can Summer Music Festival at Mass MoCA, which I believe Jeremy has attended. Has anyone else attended this?
I went, gosh, I can't remember, like 2005. I went twice, 2005, 2007, I think, or maybe it was like 2003, 2007. I forget when it started. I tied it in because I could do it and go to ZMF. The dates, I remember I had to leave a ZMF to go to it. That's how I met you guys. Yeah. If you haven't gone, you should go. Everyone should go.
Awesome. Well, it is a professional development program for young composers and performers. And so, yeah, that's awesome. I've always wanted to go. I still hope to go sometime. Another program is the Asphalt Orchestra. Some of these last two things, I think I knew they were associated with Bang on a Can, but I had forgotten. And I think that's why I was so flabbergasted that there are just so many projects. But the Asphalt Orchestra is an extreme street band that offers mobile performances recontextualizing unusual music. Super cool. One of our previous guests is Amy Garapek. I know she's performed with them a few times, and she said it was a really cool experience. Found Sound Nation, which I have reported on before, but it's a technology-based musical outreach program that partners with the State Department of the U.S., and they created One Beat, which we also reported on, which is a revolutionary post-political residency program that uses music to bridge the gulf between young American musicians and young musicians from around the world. Bang on a Can also does cross-disciplinary collaborations with projects and projects with DJs, visual artists, choreographers, filmmakers, and much more. One of their recent projects that was funded by New Music USA, and it's called Bang on a Can Road Trip. And the purpose of this, their project proposal, was to celebrate 30 years of visionary programming. So, again, they started in 1987, so it's 30 years of doing all these projects and building these programs. So the project, the piece is a evening length, quote unquote, concert spectacular for the Electric Bang on a Can All-Stars. And the music is composed by Lang, Gordon, and Wolf. And it features visually stunning stage and lighting design by Candy Stations and director Michael Counts. This project is over now. It was premiered at BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and their Next Wave Festival at late October of last year. And there's now a video that was just uploaded on March 6th on their New Music USA project page of this performance. So you should check that out. It's pretty cool, pretty spectacular, as they said. And I have a quote from David Lang about the project. David says, "One of the amazing things about Bang on a Can is that we have all been traveling together for years around the world. When I think of the All-Stars, I think, of course, the great musicians and the great music, but I also have vivid memories of trying to eat late night in Fayetteville, Arkansas, trying to be a vegetarian in Hong Kong, trying to get an espresso in Bratislava in the mid-90s. And to be honest, I can't remember all the incredible concerts, but I remember every hotel that had a cool bar, every used bookstore, and every art museum in every city we ever visited." When I think of going on the road with the band, I think of the excitement, the spirit of adventure. I think of great audiences. Most of all, I think of the camaraderie among us and how happy we have been to take the show on the road. For me, that is what our piece Road Trip is all about. There's also a cool video on the project page of their proposal, and it's got them in a van, kind of like being goofy together. It's pretty cool to see them in that informal context as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about Bang on a Can, and I knew that this was connected to Jeremy because I didn't know that you had been to the marathon until Laurel mentioned that. So that's really awesome. Or not the marathon, the summer festival at Mass MoCA. Yeah, but I also noticed that your doctoral dissertation called Being and Becoming, Experiencing Steve Reich music for 18 musicians.
Yeah, man.
Oh, great.
I read your kind of abstract on that, and I thought, gosh, this reminds me of Bang on a Can, and so it makes complete sense that you went there. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the dissertation and connection to this type of music.
Oh, wow. Yeah, dissertation. Oh, that was actually, well, I got to relive it because the last time I was in America, I came to the States last year and went to good old Knoxville, Tennessee. It wasn't Florida, Laurel, it was Knoxville, to, it was the minimalism conference that was run through
the Big Ears, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
It was 6th International Conference for Music and Minimalism.
Oh, right, okay.
But run through Neath North in when was it, July. And so I sort of did a revamped version of my whole paper then. Essentially, well, it all boils down to the fact that I think Music for 18 Musicians is the greatest piece of music ever written. Well, maybe in the last 200 years. I think
That's so
the
good.
Bach B minor mass might come second. But it's funny being in England now because they are mad about minimalism here. They're nuts. Like Steve Reich is huge, and the percussionist Colin Curry, who's a British sort of concert solo percussionist. He has a group, the Colin Curry Group, I believe they're called, that only play Steve Reich because they're huge. Like England loves it, and so it got me thinking, like, why? What is it about the music that everyone we love? It's not that you pore over a score and discover that, oh, he's done this really clever harmonic progression and this, and this idea that, this piece of music is great because we've studied it and we've thought about it and we decided we're going to put it at the top. It's at the top of the canon. We like it because when you listen to it, it's just astounding. And it's not like listening to a Beethoven symphony or something like that. It's a whole other state. And so I just made me try and work out I was kind of scratching at the surface of trying to work out how to analyze the piece from that point of view, from how do you analyze the listening experience versus, well, he based the piece on these 11 chords and maybe he did a big, 1-5-1, but maybe he didn't. And maybe that's why we like this section because it's like he does a modulation and like, no, we like it because when you listen to it in that time, in the hour, it's amazing. And so trying to sort of approach it from, well, the fact that when you listen to it, you're listening to something occurring in time. And therefore, I sort of went into, different ways that you can perceive time passing. And there's a really good book. Basically, it all came from the book. There's a book called by Jonathan Kramer. I believe it's out of print now. And I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to look it up. It's like called Time in Music, I think. If you look up Jonathan Kramer, Time in Music, you'll find this book. And the idea that, and how music deals with time, and is it trying to put you in a state where you're in the present, or are you, looking forwards and backwards in the piece? And, is there like attention? I'm not describing this well because you put me on the spot. And if I had 5 minutes, I would have worked on it. But yeah, are you aware of time passing or are you in the moment is probably the best I can do at the moment. And that 18 Musicians, it intentionally lets you shift between the two. It's kind of like the analogy of like, if you're on a fast moving train, are you closing your eyes and feeling like the motion of the train, and are you rocking along with the train right at that moment, or are you looking out the window, still aware that you're flying along, but you're looking out the window at something that's this vast expanse of sort of that could seem like it's still, but you're still moving.
Yeah.
And just the way the different layers of that piece work, from like, I don't know if you know, have you all played it or come up with this piece, that there's like really fast chattering pulse that's kept up by different instruments throughout the whole piece. But then there's different layers of rhythm that happen at different rates, almost coming in over the top. And then there's like a section, and then there's half the piece. And so there's just different ways that time passes. And I think that's why the piece, that's what I was looking at in my sort of this analysis was.
And then there are those maracas.
Yeah, when the maracas come in.
Yeah. And you know, everyone, and it's interesting because they actually performed that piece last year. I think it was done by an orchestra. The London Philharmonic just put music for 18 musicians on a program, which I had never heard of before. And I thought it was really bold because normally it's done by sort of a specialist group. It's done by Steve Reich and musicians, or it's done by, you know, a new music ensemble inside a college or something like that. But the London Philharmonic put it on, and it was great. And I went to a rehearsal, and there's commonly with his music, there's a vocal group called Synergy Vocals that make a living being sort of, they're sort of the singers for hire when you do Reich's music, because they're sort of the experts. And there's a particular singer in that group, Michaela, I can't remember, again, if I'm on the spot, I should have looked this up. And she is like the expert on training this piece, of teaching groups how to play music for 18 musicians. And so they had her in, and the rest of the group joined later. And I was talking to her about the piece because I was sort of like the nerdy academic there at the time. And she exactly refers to that moment. She's like, why does everyone just like get goosebumps when the maracas come in? You know, why does it happen? And that's what I was trying to get at. It's like, it's bringing you out of a moment of stasis into a moment of change. And it's extraordinary. It's a great piece.
So, and you met Steve Reich in high school?
Well, no, what?
You met Steve Reich in high school?
No.
Oh, I thought that said that in your bio. Where did I read that? Sorry.
Don't know. I met him. Oh, I made the music of. I think I met the music of.
Oh, okay.
I put on a blurb I put on my website. I met the music of. But I did meet him at the Bang on a Can, the Mass Mocha Festival thing.
Okay.
He came and he was the guest composer. One of the years I was there, and he was the sound guy, and we did music for Malin Instruments, voices, and organ. And he was like running the faders for the piece, and it was loud. Yeah. So yeah, that was like the loudest marimbas I've ever heard.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was also introduced to him in high school. My sister was dating a bass player named Matt Toon. He's still a good friend of ours, friend of the family, sweet guy from Utah. And I must have been a junior, sophomore in high school. I don't know. I feel lucky to be introduced that young, but first CD was City Life. Any of you guys have City Life?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Check it
for
out.
me, I remember my high school music teacher, because we were on cassettes back then, gave us, we all had to have a class, like the class listening, and on that cassette was Music for Large Ensemble. And it was like a cassette version of the original recording. So it was all hissy and kind of lo-fi. And it just, that's probably why I'm here now, because of that. It was great.
Yeah. Zoltan Rotz told us a good story about the Amadinda recording. You know, like one take, full live performance. That still might be my favorite.
I like
Music for 18.
Yeah, and the original Music for 18, you know, there's wrong notes. And yeah, it's great. It's really raw and just it's awesome, and sort of not this really. I mean, I love the really high tech, beautifully recorded marimbas and this gorgeous lush acoustic for all of it. But there's just something about this sort of that sort of drier, older instruments. They're not the best sounding instruments that I think that is fantastic.
Yeah. What are you gonna say, Ben?
Oh, I just had something about Bang on a Can that Megan left out. Do you guys know the cartoon Arthur?
I know of it, yeah.
So there was actually an episode of Arthur that had "Bang on a Can" on it, and Julia Wolf did her own voice, and it had I just found it. There's a little 1 minute 40-second clip of it on YouTube. It's really cute. And it's from the episode Binky's Music Madness. It features percussionist David Cosson, clarinetist Evan Zipyorn, and cellist Ashley Bathgate, and guitarist Mark Stewart, bassist Robert Black, pianist Vicky Chow, and the voice of Julia Wolf.
Well, that's the All-Star.
And
yeah,
I've never,
That's the American
I
All-Stars,
haven't seen
yeah.
the full episode, but the little clip, it's kind of cool. Like it shows a little like cartoon versions of all the people in Bang on a Can playing in their ensemble. And then they're standing outside and they're like, "I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know that concert was going to sound like that." And they're like, "Oh, that's okay. I liked it." And then it's like, "Oh, I'm Julia Wolf, the composer." It's like really good.
Oh, cool. All right, I gotta
That's
find that.
pretty
That
cool.
sounds fun. So,
But I think it's cool that they were, trying to introduce new music to, kids, basically.
Yeah.
So a great movie. I don't think I've mentioned it, but David Lang did the film music to the whole thing. It's called Untitled, and it's totally contemporary music making fun of itself.
I know. I've always wanted to see that movie. I know exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
Really
just
good.
just go
I would
watch
like to
it.
take
It's-
credit for introducing you to that movie.
And actually, when I visited
It's
Casey
so
and Laurel,
funny.
we watched just the opening scene of it, and it's like every new music cliche, like the gigantic page turn, the screaming person, the broken glass, the chains, like all that stuff is in just the opening scene. It's so good.
Oh,
It's so good.
it's so good. And I mean, actually, it's hilarious that it's such an inside joke is the thing. I mean, only we would get it, I mean, only all the very niche contemporary musicians would really get every single little joke. But it also, by the end of it, I mean, it raises a really cool question about serious art versus hotel art, or art, just pop art that's just kind of for background, without demeaning either of them. It's oh yeah, right, spoiler alert. No, but come on, it's still, you can watch it still. It's good.
Don't even watch it now. Casey's just ruined it.
Yeah,
I
it's
want to
over.
watch it more now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Megan, you have to watch it. I feel like you'll especially really like it.
Yeah.
It's just speaking of those musicians, it's just reminded me that that's probably, from a percussionist point of view, or just being a musician point of view, going to that summer school, meeting those players is just the most extraordinary thing. I mean, yes, you meet the Bang on a Can composers, but the musicians are just the most extraordinarily lovely group of people. And so just to meet them, and they're so generous and so honest and giving of their time. And then you start to learn about, like you mentioning Mark Stewart playing guitar, he's a guitarist. His day gig is playing for Paul Simon. He's like Paul Simon's touring guitarist the rest of the time when he's not playing for Bang on a Can. And he's just the nicest, coolest, like down-to-earth guy. And so I sort of wrote to him a little bit, and I was in Sydney and I saw that Paul Simon was coming they were doing Simon and Garfunkel were touring, and they were in New Zealand, and the news announced they were coming to Sydney. So I just emailed Mark, said, "Hey, you're coming to Sydney. Can I get a ticket for me and my mum, who's a big fan?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And so he got us like awesome seats that cost like regular people hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And he came out before the show and kind of said hi, and we walked out to the audience, and like no one knew who he was. But then he did the concert, and it was awesome. And he came out again afterwards, and everyone around us was staring at us, like thinking we must have been like these crazy famous people because we knew a guy in the band. It was just Mark Stewart, it was just the
That's
nicest.
hilarious.
Yeah, no, but the meeting of players, and David Cosson is just a super amazing percussionist, and just they're so easygoing, and yeah, it's a good hangout as well as meeting these beautiful people.
That's awesome.
Oh, very, very, very
Seeing
cool.
their new music project page also is kind of humbling, because even they've been doing this for 30 years and they have gigs like you just mentioned, Jeremy.
Yeah.
They're asking for money for this project. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, it's so hard. It's just, making art is hard, and it never gets easier. And I think looking at them, they're so successful and they have so many projects, and they've been doing this for over 30 years together. And in their video, they're like, "Hey, we're in this car, and like we want to do this project, and like we need money. Can you help us?"
Well, and they're looking for, they said in that video, they're looking for $90,000. Like, that's crazy. That's, yeah, wow. Anyway.
That's a lot of money.
Well, guys, thanks so much. This was a blast. Jeremy, it's so great to see you again. We miss you. We want you and Nina to move back to the States.
Maybe.
America's just getting better like every day. Did you watch the news?
Yeah, things are looking real stable there at the moment.
Yeah, stuff here is like
my
awesome.
God.
Like it's like everything they said. Like all those promises about it being awesome, they're like coming true day by day. You should just come back.
Well, you will be friends with North Korea soon, so there'll be world peace. He'll have fixed everything. It'll be awesome.
That's right. Let's see if this episode makes it in the next 2 weeks. If this episode even comes out in time. Yeah, we will see. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. We'll catch you on 138.
Sounds good. Bye.